Okay, I've got some kind of weird sinus allergy thing going on this week, so I don't know how clear my voice is going to be talking on here. I've also been playing around with my volume. I'm trying to get the right volume where it doesn't blare, but where it's not too faint, and I seem to have been unable to figure that out quite as of yet. But I had an idea for something this week that had popped up into my mind that used to irritate me very much when I'd hear it read in these Quackaholics Anonymous meetings, where they would read that deep down inside we were fooling ourselves, and it's in their probably the one chapter I hate the most in their literature about the we agnostics, but it says deep down inside every man, woman, and child has a fundamental idea of God, that it could be obscured by the worship of other things, which is a typical religious spiel. You know, the only reason you haven't accepted our cult is because you're a hedonistic materialist who doesn't care anything about spiritual matters because you're a drinker or a person with an addiction problem. It's another phony way of selling the religion. It used to kill me when I would see new people come in, including myself, and they'd have questions. They'd say, "Read We Agnostics if you have problems, with faith," or something like that. And you read it, We Agnostics, and it's just this overall preachy, full of fallacies kind of chapter that's just more or less appealing to your emotions. It's saying that if you don't just automatically swallow Bill W.'s dogmatic ideals, that you're somehow prejudiced and closed-minded. It used to kind of crack me up, and I've talked about this before on other videos, where they would say that we were blinded by prejudice. And I've talked before about the fact that if somebody comes up to you on the street and says, "There's an invisible realm and you can't see it here," and you say, "Well, I don't really believe in that," and they accuse you of being blinded by prejudice and willful ignorance and all this other stuff, you'd kind of write them off as a nutcase. But one line I used to see get tossed around in there all the time, as though there was some kind of proof behind all of this, was that one little sentence about deep down inside every man, woman, and child is a fundamental idea. And everybody would trip off the word fundamental idea. And everybody would, more or less what you're saying is everybody has a sense of wonder, and everybody has a sense of something that fills them full of wonder from time to time. Therefore, Bill W.'s cult religion is true. Deep down inside every man, woman, and child, I mean, for one thing, you can't possibly know what goes on with deep down inside every man, woman, and child all over the earth, in every single country, in every single region, in every single culture. You can't possibly know what the fundamental ideas are. You would really be better off saying deep down inside people in general is a fundamental idea of what they've been taught and what they've experienced. That is really the whole bare bones of the entire thing. For example, if I said to you, what is, I'm just going to pull a word out. What does rain, summertime rain mean? You might have some images pop up in your head. You might see sitting on a porch and looking at rain trickling down and distant lightning off in the distance along with thunder, and you might have a picture of a lawn, or you might have a picture of a bunch of birds on a power line somewhere. But it would be a perception that would come into your mind based on things you've experienced in life, maybe things you read in books or things you saw in movies, things you were taught as a child, but it wouldn't prove that there's some mystical circumstance to the word summertime rain. It would be like the word Thanksgiving. Okay, if I said the word Thanksgiving, you might see a whole bunch of, in my case, I see a whole bunch of family members shouting and screaming at one another over a whole bunch of food when you're overstuffed, and everybody's swearing up and down they'll never talk to one another again. And somebody, usually it was, like I said before, in my own experience, it was the sober people in my environment growing up that were the troublemakers and the fuss makers. It wasn't the people who was drinking, but usually somebody would be throwing a temper tantrum about somebody having too much to drink on a holiday or whatever it was. But if I said that word to you, that may not be what you picture in your mind. You might picture something completely different. You might picture, if you grew up in the Midwest somewhere, you might picture some farm or some going to your aunt's house or something like that. If you grew up in Florida somewhere, you'd have a completely different idea or a completely different picture of it. it would be the same thing with any other kind of thing, a word that you could mention. It would give you an image, it would give you an idea or a thought based on something you experienced in life, something you read in a book, something you saw on TV, or something you were taught by your parents. But to say deep down inside every man, woman, and child is this fundamental idea of something, therefore my cult religion is right, is really just playing on your sense of wonder or playing on your own senses and perceptions to instill in you this idea that because you have a fundamental idea of something, maybe because of the culture that you were raised in, or maybe because of the circumstances you were brought up in. Like if you said church, okay, I'm picturing a certain cathedral in a certain place where I grew up. I'm hearing bells that were ringing, in Sunday evening masses in the Catholic Church. I'm seeing priests. I'm seeing all kinds of other associations and memories, taste, sense, colors, and everything else that's associated with the word church. But it doesn't mean that because I have that feeling of a certain word in my head when I hear the word church, that it proves that there's anything mystical or spiritual to that, any more than you're probably having a mental picture in your head right now when you're hearing the word church. So it kills me how he's saying deep down inside we're fooling ourselves, when if you really want to dissect all that and put it into plain English, he's saying deep down inside we all have perceptions and experiences and things that we were taught as children that are still leftover vestiges in our brains. Therefore, that proves my cult religion is right, and you need to surrender your will and your life over to me now, because I just appeal to that little bit of emotion inside of you that says there's something beyond all of this. And because I was able to pinpoint that, now the cult religion of AA is correct. It's kind of like I saw a thing one time about, I was reading online or I saw it on television, I can't remember which, when they were talking about like certain psychics. One of the oldest kind of tricks in the book, when you were trying to do an old parlor game or something like that, you might say to somebody, you feel sometimes that people aren't taking you as seriously as you feel that you should be taken. Sometimes you don't feel like you're playing as big of a role in your life as you feel you should be. But you feel kind of like some people are ignoring you. Well, spoiler alert, everybody feels like that at some point or the other. It's kind of like, it was the old movie, was it Nightmare Alley, I think the name of it was, where the actor is playing the part of one of these carnival sideshow psychics, and he's talking to a group of hobos by a train yard, and he says, I see a boy, and I see a dog, and I see an older lady, and I see, I'm really clearly seeing you walking with your dog somewhere, and the guy's like, oh yeah, I had a dog, my dog was named whatever, and that woman you're talking about is my mother. And he kind of cynically laughs because he's drinking himself to death in that scene, but he says everybody on some level had a dog or a pet or something like that growing up. It's really one of the oldest tricks in the books, but it keeps the superstitious rubes who come to the carnivals, it keeps them paying money to hear more about themselves. You can make any kind of vague, broad assertions that you would like to make about somebody's character, and when you pinpoint that thing about somebody's character, they might say, well, that's weird how he knew that about me. I wonder how he figured that out. It doesn't take nothing. It's no different than a carnival sideshow trick, and in the case of someone who's trying to create a religious cult like Bill W., it's really just a standard old-time con artist trick that you would employ on anybody, especially somebody who's eat up with addiction, is bound to have, like, if somebody was talking to me on the street, they said, I'm just drinking way too much, my life just feels like it's in shambles at times, and I said, sometimes early in the morning, you're looking at the world and you're thinking to yourself, I wish life wasn't like this, I wish that there was something else I could do. You feel a deep yearning inside of you to change, but you just can't simply implement the change. If I said something like that to somebody and they were in a vulnerable state, they might say to me, man, that's so spot on. How did you figure that out? How did you know that? I mean, it's true. When I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm drinking vodka and I'm thinking about what my life used to be like versus what my life is like now, it's exactly what you're talking about. I just don't know how you did that like that. It's very easy, because anybody who's eat up in their addictions at one point or the other has had a morning like that. I had plenty of them, where I'd be sitting on the side of the bed and I'd be drinking myself into a stupor already at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I'd be thinking to myself, man, I remember the good old days when I didn't have to live like this and when I wasn't doing things like this. And yeah, I think pretty much anybody with an addiction has done something like that. But it used to just kill me how they would how they would just throw that out in a meeting in these overly profound tones, like it was supposed to absolutely prove something of some mystical importance to everybody. Deep down inside every man, woman, and child is a fundamental idea. We just can't know about this because we're too busy worshiping other things. That's like the people that tried to say that alcohol was your God when you got here. There's no doubt about it. Alcohol was your God. That's a bunch of bullshit, okay? The really true thing that was going on with me in the worst days of my drinking, when I was physically dependent upon alcohol, it had nothing to do with me worshiping the fucking booze. It had to do with the fact that I was in tremendous amounts of pain, okay, and experiencing the first terrifying effects of severe withdrawals, where my hands were shaking and I was starting to sweat and I was nauseated, and I said, you know something, I can get a little of this booze in me and I won't feel like this anymore. Or I can sit here and vomit and throw up and sweat and have muscle cramps and anxiety attacks that are going through the roof. Or I can have a little of this and that won't be there. I can't remember who it was in a book I read one time that said, imagine that you got a really bad headache. And imagine that there's an aspirin, there's an aspirin at every gas station, there's an aspirin at every Walgreens, there's an aspirin everywhere. And you got all these people telling you, well, you shouldn't take aspirin. If you take an aspirin, you're spiritually deficient. You're not living in God's grace. You're driven by 100 forms of fear and all that. Sooner or later, you're going to say to yourself, you know what? My fucking head is hurting, and I'm going to take that fucking aspirin and make that headache pain go away. I'm not saying that the thing you're doing with your addiction is like in the same category as an actual physical disease, but when you're physically dependent on something, like I was physically dependent on it, or mentally dependent on something, like when I just suffered from a turmoil that was going on in my life day in and day out, where my entire day, from the moment I woke up to the moment I could get off work, was nothing but one big miserable anxiety attack filled with worry and strife and misery. And I know, all I got to do is crack open that bottle and take a swallow out of it, and all that stuff will go away. Even if it'll just go away for a few moments, it'll still go away, and I'll have momentary peace. That's really all there is. There's nothing to it about, alcohol being your higher power or some quasi-religious thing. Now, I know AA people love to do a lot of semantics. They love to take words and they like to stretch them out and turn them into meaning anything and everything. It was kind of like this one. There was a popular saying among these old timers in one group I used to go to. There's only two problems in the world. There's romance and there's finance. Romance and finance. That's the only two problems an alcoholic has. And I said, well, what about somebody that's got a sick parent? What about somebody that's got a sick kid? What about somebody who's got a brother or a sister who's going through a hard time and it's grating on their mind? What is that? Their love of family is romance. I'm like, love of family is romance. So in other words, you're going to take a word like romance and you're going to stretch it all the fucking way out until it can mean anything and everything and anything, which means it means absolutely nothing at all, in order to keep your semantic game going so it'll look like you're always right about everything. Sometimes there are problems in my life that has nothing to do with romance and finance. There's a lot of things that could be going on, like what's going on with me this morning when I woke up and I had a sore throat and a runny nose, and I was like thinking to myself, holy shit, I hope this isn't another cold, or holy shit, I hope this isn't COVID coming back, which I don't think it is. I don't feel like I got a fever right now, but that certainly is not romance and finance. It's the same thing with them saying that alcohol is your God or alcohol is your higher power. The only way that you could make an addiction your God or higher power would be if you stretch the word God out to mean anything or every fucking thing, which in truth, when you do that, it means absolutely nothing at all, because you can apply it to anything and everything. When you say the word God to me, or when here's my deep down inside of me conception of it, when you say something that involves a deity, and when it involves worshiping that deity, and when it involves doing things on behalf of the commandments of that deity, or whatever it is you want to call it, that's not the same thing as me saying, this bottle of whiskey is going to make these shakes go away, so I can't wait to get a few swallows of it deep down inside of me, It just is another one of their many, many plays on words that they do in order to rook you into the cult with their subtle mind manipulation tactics that they use. See, it doesn't overtly come right out and say what it really means, which is just because you have feelings that there might be a God, just because you look at the sky sometimes and you think, I wonder if there's anything beyond all this. I wonder what it's really all for. I wonder if there's an ultimate purpose about that. That doesn't automatically give them to make a leap from that all the way to this gigantic assertion that therefore that's true. You know, it's a complete leap. It's a complete dichotomy type leap altogether. It would be like saying everybody, when they look at the rain coming down on a beautiful spring day, they feel something deep and longing inside of them. Therefore, AA is correct, and you got to do a 4-step and a 5th step and all that other stuff. Anyway, I think I've about covered everything I can cover in this short 15 minutes. So yeah. I'm not really feeling 100% on top of my health right now, so I'm just going to say until next time, maybe I'll be more coherent. Later.